Hi, good evening. Thank you all for coming here tonight. It's really nice of you to be out on a Thursday night, and I appreciate that very much. It's really exciting for me to be here because it's the first time I get to talk to people that are not in the same world that I'm in. I live in this kind of world of people working on nuclear weapons, and sometimes it feels like a very big world, and sometimes it feels like a very small world. And in the last week, it's felt like quite a big world, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But it's really nice to talk to people who don't think about nuclear weapons every day. It really is. It's for the last quite a long time. I won't say exactly how long. It's something that I've been thinking about almost every day, and something that can be very hard to think about. Because when you think about nuclear weapons and how to get rid of nuclear weapons, it's very disempowering. It's a really big weapon. It's a very dangerous weapon. It's the worst weapon that's ever created. And you feel kind of like you can't do anything. And so I don't like to feel like I can't do things. I have a bit of a rebellious personality. I believe I can change the world. I believe I am changing the world. I believe that it's working with people around me that together we do change the world. Because I've seen the world change in my lifetime, and I know it will continue to do that. And thinking about nuclear weapons and how do you feel strong in dealing with nuclear weapons, we thought, well, maybe we need to come around this problem a little differently. Maybe we need to bring in a new tool to connect to this issue, to do something that we know we can have some success with. Because it's nice to work on an issue and to win. It is. It's hard when you work on an issue and you kind of keep feeling defeated and defeated. So we wanted to find a way to kind of stand up and to work strong on this issue. And so we started this project called Don't Bank on the Bomb. And this is a project that lets us kind of really examine the power of money. And money does a lot of things, and some of it is good. Money is used to do great things in the world, and some of it is not good. And with this project, we look at some of the things that money does that's not so good, and we find ways to make our money, be used to have our voices heard. So we built on some other experiences, some other campaigns. And we started publishing this report, Don't Bank the Bomb, in order to get kind of a different approach to the question of nuclear weapons. And I'll tell you what the report is. It is the only report in the world that looks at what companies are directly involved in making the key components for nuclear weapons. Because it's not just governments that make these things. It's actually private companies. And so we started to do some research and figure out, okay, this explains a lot about the lobbying behind getting nuclear weapon contracts. This explains a lot. These companies have an interest in keeping nuclear weapons going. We look at those companies. We identify them. We publish a list of the 27 most heavily involved companies in the production of nuclear weapons. We keep it updated, it's on our website, and we keep track of what these companies are doing. Then, of course, like other things, these are publicly traded companies. They can't do what they want to do without investors. You need to kind of get capital to get in and do some of these projects. So we list who actually invests in these companies. When we look at stockholders, bondholders, who gives them loans? What big banks, what pension funds, who invests in these companies? But there's a flip side to that. There's the banks and the pension funds that say they won't invest. So we look at those as well. And those are quite nice, and I talk to those a lot. And it's fun to talk to, it's very different when you work on nuclear weapons to start talking to an insurance company. And not about whether your house is covered in case there's a nuclear bomb going off, because trust me, nobody's house is covered. But instead about their investment and their investment policies. And we're finding more and more that these financial institutions, once they realize that they have a choice, they think about their choices on investment, they want to get out of the nuclear weapon business. It's amazing. Since we started doing this report, the first report was in 2012, and the most recent report last December we published. And we went from 12 financial institutions that had some kind of policy to a heck of a lot more. Now I think we're at 54 financial institutions that will not invest in any company associated with the production of nuclear weapons. It's not a lot, but it's not a lot of us either. So, but we definitely do our best. And we talk about who divests. And then of course, because we started this, because we felt like we needed to do something different and find tools to actually make change around nuclear weapons, we put together things that people can do. Because people like to do stuff. And doing stuff changes the world. And my old friends will all know I say that a lot. We have to do stuff, because doing stuff is fun. Anyway, so I'm going to talk a little bit about these different things. The first thing is, it's looking at this question of, when we talk to these banks, when we talk to these financial institutions, they often come back and they say, but it doesn't make a difference where we put our money. We're just a small bank. We're just, we're not that big of a deal. We're just a little asset management company. It doesn't really matter. We come back and say, well, yeah, actually it does. Because when you decide to invest in a company, even if you limit the type of investment that you give, and you say, I'm only going to invest for general purposes. I'm not going to invest in these projects, just the general purposes. That still frees up money to go to those other projects. And investments are not neutral. It is a decision, and it is a conscious decision that is made. And one of the things that we're finding is when we talk about nuclear weapons, we talk about these are weapons that are designed to attack and kill everyone in a city with one bomb. This is an indiscriminate weapon by design. It is an inhumane weapon by design. The last several years, we started talking about the effects of the weapon instead of kind of assigning them a sort of magical security property. And the world has changed in how it looks. Not every country in the world. 132 countries, though, are just finished the first round of negotiations in New York to make these weapons illegal. That's pretty good, because we talked about it from the effect of the weapon. It's amazing. And so banks, pension funds, we start talking to them about the effects of these weapons and that they have a choice. We want them to stop investing in these companies. There's 27 companies most heavily involved in the nuclear weapons industry that we've been able to identify. And I need to point that out. The production of nuclear weapons is often very secret. And so we don't know for sure every single detail of every company. But we want to draw financial institution attention to this. And we want to draw the public's attention to this. Because we can't do anything unless we know stuff. See? Again, my favorite word, stuff. And we can't do anything unless we know stuff. And information is power. So this is a bit of that information. We're about to lay out the plan and start this year's research to do the updates. And it's amazing. Because nobody hands us a nice list. These are all the companies. I wish they did. It would be so cool. Instead, a colleague and I sit and we go through all of the announcements of contracts. We go through the requests for proposals. We look for things related to strategic systems. And sometimes we look at the job descriptions of projects that people are hiring for in order, can we make the legitimate link? Because no company says, hey, we're making nuclear bombs. Okay, that's not true. A couple of companies do say that, but most of them don't. And companies that you don't associate with nuclear weapons, they certainly don't. Boeing and Airbus, you associate with planes. We're working to get them out of the nuclear industry, nuclear weapons industry, I should be clear. We have had success with this tactic before, and it sounds like a monolithic thing, but I want to talk about this one, Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin, huge. They describe themselves as the world's largest weapons producer. Yeah. And that's okay, bully for them. But that's not great. Now, there are some weapons that are illegal and some weapons that are not. Lockheed Martin is a US-based company. The United States does not like to sign treaties. Now I don't know what's going to happen to the United States. Let's not talk about that right now. But the US, even in the last 15, 20 years, does not like to sign international treaties, especially when it comes to restricting weapons. They didn't sign the landmine treaty. They didn't sign the cluster bombs treaty. Lockheed Martin was a huge producer of cluster bombs. A lot of financial institutions said, ooh, we're not going to give them money anymore because they're making illegal weapons. Lockheed Martin said, we want to get that money. Come on, give us the money. Financial institutions, more. National legislation went into place in 10 countries to say you're not allowed to finance producers of cluster munitions. Lockheed Martin said, okay, we'll stop making cluster munitions. And they did. So it's a tactic. The weapon became illegal, which is we're on the path to that with nuclear weapons right now. But the weapon became illegal. Lockheed Martin got out of the game. And so it's a tactic that works, and it makes us kind of excited because we think, oh, maybe this can work for nuclear weapons. That's what we're hopeful for. And I'm an eternal optimist. But there, these are the companies. Very big stuff. And then there's the investors. I showed you how much got invested to the companies. We still found 390 financial institutions. Sorry, I broke the rule on PowerPoint and made too much text. I'm really sorry. To me, it's interesting, but it's also because it's what I do. So please feel free to not be interested. We'll get to more interesting stuff. But 390 financial institutions invest in these 27 companies, and they invest significantly. So we have a little bit of a threshold for stockholders, because if we listed every single stockholder, the list would be quite long. And there's some organizations that do cool things, like they buy a share or buy a stock in order to go to annual meetings and make statements, or to request items get on the agenda for the annual shareholders meeting to talk about the inhumane weapons that company is producing. We don't want to give those guys a bad time. We like what they do. But we found 390 financial institutions that do invest significantly. And we look at a 3-year time period. Because sometimes if we just looked at 1 year at a time, we have long-term loans, and longer term, it's the loans really more than anything else. We want to make sure that we show all of that. And most of these are North American, most of these are US-based, which is unsurprising. Some are in Europe, some are in the Middle East. There's none in Africa or Latin America, not a one. I thought about this, and we used to have a South African bank that was investing in one of the producing companies. And we were in touch with them. And we said, hey, First Rand Bank, why are you an investor? And they said, we didn't realize it. And they sold their stock, which is great. Very happy about that. And they said, we have to sell our stock because we're in Africa, and Africa is a nuclear weapon-free zone. We have a treaty agreement. We've prohibited nuclear weapons in this region. So it's illegal. We consider it to be illegal to spend money and give money to these companies. Same thing in Latin America. They had a 50-year anniversary of becoming the world's first populated nuclear weapon-free zone. It's the Treaty of Tlatelolco. And my Mexican friends laugh at me when I try to say that one too. Sometimes they think I say Latin loco, which for Spanish speakers, means something completely different. Anyway, so we found 390 institutions that invest. And they invest almost $500 billion, which is a lot of money. I have a hard time conceptualizing this much money. to be honest with you. You know, I know that if you figure 500 billion, so 500 billion is half of a trillion, right? So almost 500 billion is about, and that's US dollars, so that's about $30,000 per minute. Per minute, if you spend $30,000 every minute of every day for 30 years. That's about $500 billion. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. Now, that's at the same time, in that 30-year period, the United States government plans on spending $1 trillion on new nuclear weapons and new nuclear weapons systems. And that's the most Americans earn less per year than the US will spend per minute on nuclear weapons, which is just, again, it's mind-boggling. And I can't think about these numbers very easily. And so I have to break them down into smaller pieces that I can understand. I can understand 30,000. You know, I know what that is because I know, you know, because I have bills and rent and a budget and childcare to pay for. I know these numbers. But when I think about this number, it's too much. So we have to look at things in different ways too, and we try to do that with our report. We try to make it understandable. This is a great image that I picked up from friends with the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, who talk about nuclear weapons like you talk about smoking. You know, it's never the smokers who are going to, you know, stop smoking spontaneously. They always have an excuse. They'll quit, you know, just not right now because it's stressful at work, or not right now because I'm on a diet, or not right now because, you know, I'm going out drinking with my friends or whatever. They'll do it, just not right now. And that's what they say, the nuclear armed governments say about nuclear weapons. We'll give them up, just not right now. It's not the right time. Yeah, that's why other governments are kind of looking for ways to push them into doing it. And one of the ways to push them is to increase the stigma. And that's why we work with financial institutions, because that increases the stigma, you know? And even without nuclear weapons being illegal right now, the stigma around them is growing. And think about how think about the way investments work. And you don't invest in things that seem like a bad idea. Like, you know, things like, tobacco itself is not illegal, right? But a lot of financial institutions will not invest in tobacco companies because they say, it's not something our clients really want, and it has a bad public image. So we're trying to kind of work in multiple directions to give nuclear weapons that same sort of bad public image. It's an interesting struggle, I'll tell you. Some people do really like to defend nuclear weapons. I don't get it, but they do. And, you know, so we're looking at ways to bring that around. It can be quite fun. And we've done okay with this. It's not perfect, but we're getting there. And what we've gotten now, so again, me and big numbers, right? What we've gotten now is through our work and through policies at 18 different financial institutions. They have what we consider perfect policies to prohibit any type of investment in any type of nuclear weapon company. And that has kept this much money, 1.7 trillion euros, outside of those nuclear weapon companies. Again, that's a nice big number. I had to write it out and I had to check like 4 times to make sure I had all the zeros because it's a big number. And this is just the 18 best financial institution policies that we've found. Now, I'm going to be honest. We have not looked at every single financial institution in the world. What we do is we talk to those who have the good policies. Who else has good policies? Who else has any policy? And we ask people in different countries. We're part of this global campaign, the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons, which is 400 some odd organizations in over 100 countries. And we ask our colleagues, do you know financial institutions in your country with cool policies? And they come back, and 18 of them we consider perfect by our criteria. It's not a lot, but it's not a little either, because that's how much money they control. And this is in Australia and Denmark, Italy, Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, and the UK. So these are some good financial institutions, even in countries like the UK that has nuclear weapons, or countries like everybody else on that list except for Sweden that are part of NATO, or rely on US nuclear weapons like Australia does. So that's pretty good. That shows that you can have a difference and put some pressure on things through this different way. And these are very powerful institutions that are pushing the idea further, that are suggesting that we quit nukes. Hey, I was really going somewhere with this. And this is, and it is the time. And this year, when we published our report in December, we had this amazing announcement. Because in October, 123 governments voted to start negotiations to ban nuclear weapons. Every time I say it, I get a little chill, because I've worked in this field for a long time, and the idea of nuclear weapons being prohibited by international treaty is just so exciting to me. And it's happening. And I just got back from New York on Sunday, literally, just got back from the first round of negotiations. And it was quite a good time. And if it's okay, I'll tell you a little bit about what it means now that the ban is coming. Oh, whoops. Let's go back. Yeah, okay, let me go back to this. No, you know what? I'll skip around. We'll go like this. Right, so this is one of the activities that we did during the, what we did during the negotiations. So the negotiations started, turned out 132 governments participated, which was very exciting. The Netherlands was there, gave a statement saying that they're worried. They don't know how you can make nuclear weapons illegal and still host American nuclear weapons in the Netherlands. They realize there's a contradiction there, and they know that there's going to have to be a way to figure this out. They're not sure how to deal with it yet, but they were there. Germany was not, and it was rather disappointing for a lot of people, not least fellow campaigners around here, because Germany is seen as a leader and seen as very progressive and very supportive of multilateralism, supportive of the EU, supportive of the way that countries can come together and figure out problems without fighting each other, right, and talk. And, when I think of NATO, I think of it as Article 4, which is an agreement that if you have an issue with one another, you sit down and you talk to one another. That's, to me, that's a big part of NATO. Germany, unfortunately, wasn't there. And talking to other governments, this is a General Assembly, UN General Assembly mandated negotiation. This is the majority of the world's governments that say we need to do this. But they weren't there. But maybe they're kind of like the smokers that are saying, hey, we'll quit when it's the right time. But it wasn't the smokers that said you can't smoke inside anymore. It was other people who did that, who added that layer of stigma. And, I'm thinking that Germany's standing outside of this negotiation right now. It's kind of like a smoker standing outside shivering when all of his friends are inside having a beer. But it's very exciting. What was really exciting is that there were a lot of countries that laid out very clearly, this is what we want to make illegal. And they actually read off lists, which is kind of cool when you think about it. Like I've never been in this situation where I'm looking around the room and the Caribbean community, in a speech delivered by Antigua and Barbuda, said very, very clearly, we want these 12 things to be illegal. One of the things they said was the financing of nuclear weapon producers. Very cool for me, because I've been asking them to do stuff like that. Yes, you have a question?
Are these people from the government? Or?
Yes. Oh. Yes, they're from government. So these are the government representatives, so ambassadors to the United Nations, or in the case of Thailand, Thailand had a very big delegation. Mexico also, big delegation. Jamaica, small delegation, very powerful statements. And the Caribbean community came together, Caribbean community, African group, community of Latin America and Caribbean came together, ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, all came together and gave joint statements saying we want this prohibition and we want to make sure it includes everything related to the use of nuclear weapons, the possession of nuclear weapons. Not everybody said the financing of nuclear weapon producers, but some did. And the fact, it's a discussion point. The government of New Zealand said, we're not sure if we want to include financing yet, but we want to figure out how it would be possible. Because in New Zealand, there's national legislation that makes it a criminal act to aid or abet anyone in the process of manufacturing, producing, or using nuclear weapons. It's kind of cool. Like it's if you know, and according to New Zealand law, then if I help out somebody in fixing up a nuclear bomb, I can go to jail. Like, way to go, Kiwis! But they don't know about financing, how to deal with it. And nationally, it's already illegal to invest. They don't know if it should be an international treaty. We have fun discussing it. New Zealand delegation is great. And so 132 countries came together, but Germany was not there. And that made a lot of people quite disappointed. Sad is too strong, but like disappointed. Like, kind of get let down. And where's the commitment to international institutions? But anyway, I'll come back to that in a bit. Like I said, the financing thing came up, and this is the Jamaican delegation. I like the Jamaican delegation very much. Also because that part of the world I find to be extremely beautiful, and I think the accent is one of the loveliest things on the ear. So then they said very clearly what the treaty should make illegal. The acquisition, stockpiling, development, testing of nuclear weapons, transfer, station, deployment, assistance, encouragement, or inducement, and included the financing of nuclear weapons. And I appreciated very much the Jamaican delegation for raising that. Because again, right now, when it comes to other illegal weapons, like landmines or cluster bombs. Cluster bombs in 10 countries, like I said, there's legislation that makes it illegal to finance the producers. 30 other countries say, the treaty says it's illegal to provide any assistance. It uses these words, assistance, encouragement, or inducement to engage in prohibited acts, because that's the treaty language. And these other 30 countries say, we consider assistance to also cover financing. So within those countries, they don't want anyone to finance the production of an inhumane and indiscriminate weapon. And nuclear weapons are inhumane and indiscriminate. So we want to see the same. So I'm going to go back a bit and now just quickly talk about what people can do. Because that's the fun thing about working on this issue, is that everybody, let me ask the question. Is there anybody in this room that does not have a bank account? I asked that question once, and somebody raised their hand, and I said, okay, we're going to talk later about how you can get involved. But, you have bank accounts, right? And do you know where your bank, is it a socially responsible bank? Is it an ethical bank? There's an ethical bank over there.
Yeah, sure.
Excellent. Yeah, excellent. Do they consider nuclear weapons controversial? So they stop investment in nuclear weapons? Because not all ethical banks do. You think so? Okay.
Yeah, I'm quite sure I looked that up when I saw the account.
Oh, very good. Yeah, congratulations. That's good. That's wow, way further than a lot of people go. Excellent. Because it's a very easy question, if you don't know, to ask. And that's what I always say is the first thing you can do. On our website, we have a handy tool. You can just find your bank, and we have you can send them a message, and it just sends an email to their general, accounts, their email account saying, I'm a client. I want to know if you have investments in any of these companies. Because sometimes they publish their investments, but sometimes they don't. And they're not legally required to make public every single investment. So you can ask. That's something that is always great, because it starts a conversation. And starting a conversation is how we get stuff done. So publishing, or requesting information is one way to do that. Praising them if they don't have investment. You never get to say, well done to people, when you're working on war and peace issues. It's hard to find those moments of congratulations. And if your bank doesn't have an investment, tell them you're proud of them for that. Put it out on Twitter. Almost every bank has Twitter and Facebook. Send a note on their Facebook page. We got a bank in Sweden to change its investment policy because we had a small article in a local, very regional newspaper in northeast Sweden. And a bunch of people read it and went to the bank's Facebook page and said, "What? You have investments in nuclear weapon producers? No." And it was 4 or 5 messages that got this bank to kind of get really worried because it's bad PR. And that year we didn't manage to get the main newspaper in Sweden. Sometimes we don't get all the media coverage we want. But we had a really profound impact. Tiny little regional paper, 5 people posting a question on Facebook. That bank now changed its policy. That bank's now part of that 1.7 trillion that doesn't invest. That was really cool. And it's because people read stuff, learned stuff, did stuff. It's a very, very nice way to go. And we help each other out in doing that. I spend a lot of my day answering people's questions. How do we do this? What can we do next? And it's really important to do so. Another thing that has been coming up recently is that there's a lot of cities around the world that in the 80s became nuclear weapon free zones. They were nuclear free zones. There was a big move to do this. It was the time of the Pershing missile deployments, and people were really fired up about nuclear weapons. And so now it's the 80s, it's a lot of years later, 30 odd. And these cities are kind of going, wait a minute, what are we doing with this little plaque? Is there anything we can do? 2 cities in the last year decided to do something. One of them in Cambridge, Massachusetts, due to the prompting of a very insistent professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He's very insistent, and he kept pushing the city, and the city said, okay, you're right, we're a nuclear weapon free zone, we never did anything except make this nice little plaque. We'll move the city's pension fund. And they moved the pension fund. It was a $1.3 billion pension fund. They moved it out of a financial institution that had investment in nuclear weapon producers and into an ethical, sustainable bank. It's good for the bank. It's good for green economy. It's good for the city. The mayor got massive PR, positive PR. Mayor Denise Simmons is, taking the lead in the anti-nuclear struggle. And, it was very cool. It was happened by a city council resolution to follow up on this otherwise, kind of dormant legislation. And now, just recently, after several years of pushing, there's a very nice woman by the name of Julie Body in Tacoma Park, Maryland. I've never met Julie, but I've talked to her on the phone. And Julie sounds like she's a little kind of older lady. I have a mental picture of her as an older lady, a bit shaky, maybe using a rollator, a Zimmer frame. She has a very shaky voice, and in my mind, she's like this tall. I don't know why, it's something about her. I've talked to her on the phone just twice in the last, 3 years. And she lives in Tacoma Park, Maryland. It's a very nice area right near Washington, D.C. And she's part of the Nuclear Free Zone Authority that oversees the nuclear-free status of this city. And she's been pushing the city for the last couple of years. They had all of their financial accounts in this bank called Sun Financials. She saw a report. I don't know how. She saw a report. She got in touch. We had a big conversation about what it meant to be a producer, because she thought a producer was more like a movie producer, it was a great conversation. I never thought about that before. It was a great conversation. And Julie and I have been, we've had emails back and forth. And now, after her, again, very persistent, and I can picture her with and if I ever meet her and she isn't a little old lady with a little rollator, it's going to be very embarrassing. But Julie got in touch with me about 3 weeks ago and said the city's going to move their money. They're going to do it because, of this list and because of this information and because Julie kept pushing. More than the Zimmer. She kept pushing. And that's really cool. And again, it shows that, helping hand a little bit. When people talk about this, they can actually get things done. And the last thing I want to mention as a cool tactic that has happened in Australia, and a couple of financial institutions in Australia, is clients were upset with what their banks were investing in. So they didn't think the bank knew, or they didn't feel like the bank was taking their concerns seriously. So they stood outside the bank with a petition. Said, we want the bank to put in a policy against investing in nuclear weapon producers, and we want to meet with the bank manager to talk about what this policy would be. They didn't go to the corporate headquarters. They went to the local branch, and they talked to the branch manager. Branch manager kicked that up to corporate, and it didn't go through the social responsible investment department. It went through the public relations department. But they're trying to figure out, how do we kind of deal with this bad image we're getting? And then they got in touch with us, and they said, we're on your list as being in this hall of shame. People are complaining. How do we get off that list? It's a great email. It's a cool email to get. And we said, very easy. You invest in these companies, sell the stock. I said, well, we got to think about that. I said, all right, well, then we're just going to keep you on the list until you make up your mind. Make sure to let our friends outside your building know. But it worked. I mean, it at least got the conversation going. They didn't put in a policy. Their numbers went down in terms of how much they invested, which is it's a good step, but it's not good enough. And so we're not taking them out of our hall of shame. Not until they actually sell off everything that they have. But it's a way to kind of let the people speak, and it's a way to amplify your voice. Because every single one of you has an account. Everyone has a voice. You all look like very intelligent people. You have opinions, I hope. You're here, so you have interest, and you can do stuff. So I'm going to kind of leave it there and ask you to do stuff, and ask you if you have questions for me on stuff you can do, and whatever else you want to talk about. But thank you very much again. Thank you.